Get full access to RFR only on Patreon. Become a member of the RFR Patreon community to get more Rebel Force Radio. Bonus shows and content are available right now only at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio.
Penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1!
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Shut, everybody. Welcome back to Rebel Force Radio. Your weekly adventure into the galaxy far, far away. Your source for the Force. We've got a great show for you this week. We got some, there's some new titles that are floating around for the Bad Batch. Also, we've got a little bit more in those Kenobi set rumors that we've been talking about. Maybe another clue, maybe a way to sort of validate what we've been talking about from Agent Kitster and his source. Also, some discussion coming up about Disney Star Wars from a certain point of view, a different point of view, according to an writer for the Atlantic magazine. Something very interesting, and we'll be talking about that. Plus Star Wars and pop culture and so much more. And of course, I'm not alone. With me, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times. That is fun to do that. Hey, Jason, hey, Star Wars fans. Just having fun right out of the gate. You know, a lot of people enjoyed that show open breakdown we did last week. And that was my first time hearing the show open since we did the breakdown itself.
It was great. And there were surprises for me, too, because that's not, we talk a lot, but I don't think that we ever actually discussed all those clips. I think over the years, I might have asked you where one or two came from, but I certainly didn't know all of that. So that was very cool. It was great that somebody asked, because otherwise you probably wouldn't have done that.
Yeah. And I always get excited when I hear it. I get pumped up. I loved it when the listener tweeted that she always recites the lines along with the show open. That's exciting to me.
Yeah.
It gives extra energy to me now, knowing that kind of activity is going on out there.
Well, there is something to be said for sticking with something that works, and we have stuck with that intro. You've changed little things here and there and added a few embellishments and over the years, but for the most part, the core of that intro has stuck, and it's very tempting. You and I have had this discussion many times over the years. Oh, should we freshen this up? Should we freshen that up? It's very tempting to do that, and of course, when any company gets into trouble, the first thing they want to do is change the logo, change the name, freshen things up. But there's really something to be said for consistency, because it breeds a certain loyalty and reliability and all of that. And I think that us sticking with it's so us, that intro is just us. And I don't know if anybody could do better, it would be you, but I don't know how it could be improved upon, really.
Oh, thanks. I've thought about changing it from time to time, but nah, it's why bother?
Why bother?
It's the show open. And that's what it is. And that's what it shall always.
You think they'll be playing that at our funerals? Like
I don't like to think
the
about
door
that.
swings open and the casket comes in. It's bam, bam, bam. That's good. It's Star Wars. The whole congregation.
As they wheel us in side by side
right,
next to each other, because obviously, I was probably driving.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
But you'll know it's me because my casket is a little smaller. It's bomb,
Bum. That would make a big splash.
It sure would. All right. Well, hey, you know what? We've been having a good time talking Bad Batch on the Bad Batch After Show. If you haven't caught it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You get notifications when we go live. It's a live call-in show that we do exclusively on YouTube. It is released as a podcast. So if you haven't had a chance to tune in live, we're going to be live this Friday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern, Bad Batch After Show. And, you know, we spend a lot of time talking to listeners in the moment. So we don't get a chance to really go back and hear voicemails and of, you know, some of the reaction, the latent reaction to our discussion. So I pulled a couple here, and we know all of the weekly Rebel Force Radio listeners are watching the Bad Batch. So here's one I thought was pretty interesting about what a lot of people are speculating. Force-sensitive clones, Palpatine, Omega, is there a connection? Let's see what they have to say.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Jimmy. It's Nathan from Atlanta. And I was just calling. I had a quick question. I was listening to one of your Bad Batch after shows. I've been re-listening to all of them. And I was thinking, like, you know, we just saw her with the green, I can't remember the Trandoshion's name, but she kind of, like, recognized, like, she was Sid while the rest of them were, like, arguing and stuff. And so you guys were talking about how, you know, she's a combination of, like, hunter, like, she can track, she's a good shot, and then she's also somewhat of an empath. And I was thinking, you know, how the Kaminoans, they are realizing Jango Fett's, like, genetic material is deteriorating or whatever, and so they're like, we need a super clone. And what if they accidentally stumbled upon a force-sensitive super clone? Like, what if it was unintentional? Not that Palpatine planned the whole thing, but that they just happened to accidentally get a clone that was force-sensitive. Because, you know, the force moves in, like, mysterious ways, and, you know, the midichlorians and all that kind of stuff is just a little bit out of the Kaminoans' control, I guess. So I don't know what your thoughts are, but love to hear your feedback. Thanks for everything you guys do.
Hey, man, thank you.
Good voicemail.
Yeah.
I like that. I like everything he's saying. I think, personally, that that's very possible, because I've always insisted that Palpatine didn't mess around with the midichlorians and force them to create life, the type of life he intended. I think the midichlorians sensed Palpatine's manipulation, and there was a counter reaction to his Sith experiments, and that resulted in Anakin Skywalker. I don't think Palpatine is the one who created Anakin, but I think as a result of his twisted experiments, however you experiment with the midichlorians, Darth Plagueis novel's got some good stuff about that. But I think that Anakin is a light side counter reaction to Palpatine's dark side experimentations with the midichlorians in his attempts to create life. While Palpatine's experiments may have created a result that ended up in life, the experiments themselves didn't create the life. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I do. I've always struggled a bit with how literal some people are with the Palpatine and the conception of the role that he might have played in the conception of Anakin Skywalker. I think Palpatine is really good at playing the hand that's dealt. And yes, he manipulates and he does all that too. But part of that manipulation is knowing how to deal with the reality of your situation, manipulate that. So I always thought that, yes, Anakin Skywalker was born as an answer to what the Sith were up to, Palpatine specifically, for that whole, balance thing. With respect to our voicemail there, this idea, now, I'd never thought of this before, but you have this massive population of clones. As far as we know, it's in the galaxy far, far away. It's the one and only time that you ever saw that technology utilized on such a mass scale. Kaminoans are cloners, but I can't imagine them having created armies of clones I don't think this is like their gig.
Well, I don't know about that. I think that's how they keep their species alive. They're all clones.
Oh, okay. Well, do we know that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if we know that, but I've always assumed they're all clones, and then they franchise their services.
So that's how they reproduce, perhaps. That's
what I'm thinking.
And so when Dexter says they're cloners, he's not necessarily talking about their business. It's more about their culture, their society, or something. Almost like when somebody would say, like, what's the multiple marriages thing? They're polygamists. Like it had that kind of a vibe to it. Like it was there was something, I don't know, unnatural about it or whatever.
Right,
yeah.
right. A society that relies on that kind of thing.
It's weird. It's weird. But what I was going for, and maybe that this is moot, but what I was going for is, would the midichlorians have found a way, kind of like that Jeff Goldblum line in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. Did the Force find a way to begin to inhabit these clones? Did it somehow, we assume that they are human. We know that midichlorians can influence humans and be make their connection to the Force very strong. I don't know. It's just almost like, to use another Jurassic Park analogy, I mean, the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park were sort of created one at a time. They were cloned, but then they started to breed, and they had more of a natural evolution as a population. So I don't know. It's something to think about. Could the midichlorians have found their way into the population of the clones in some way?
That's why I brought up the whole idea, the counter reaction.
Yeah.
The Force works in mysterious ways. And Yoda himself says it's everywhere. And he points at a tree. He points at a rock. He points at everything. Force is everywhere. So naturally, it would be attracted to a living being. And, despite the fact that clones are treated like property in the Star Wars universe, they are living beings.
Right.
They get stripped of free will, which is a huge criminal strike against any sort of humanity. But that's the harsh reality of being a clone in the Star Wars universe. So wouldn't the Force then, the light side of the Force, almost take sympathy on a clone and say, you know what, let's spread the wealth a little bit and throw some action toward these clones? And maybe the proximity of the Jedi to the clones sort of created a funnel effect where Omega got, or any clone potentially could have gotten the kiss of the Force.
Yeah. Yeah. And then is Omega a clone of that?
Well, that's just what I'm wondering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because everyone from coast to coast, around the globe, everywhere in the universe, there's so much speculation about Omega having Force abilities.
Yeah.
That's the most popular speculation about her character. And I like it.
Yeah.
But she's yet to display it. But then again, Luke had to gradually learn his powers and how to control them and how to use them. We weren't introduced to a Luke Skywalker who was able to make things float and things like that.
No, in fact, you go the whole first movie, and beyond his ability to communicate with old Ben there at the end, he's not really displaying any real signs of Force ability. You don't really see an overt Force move from Luke until Empire, when he's in the Wampa Cave and he pulls the lightsaber to him. That's the first time.
He pulls off the 1 in a million shot and blows up the Death Star. Is that diminished? Does that become diminished now by Rogue One, knowing that it was a failsafe planted by Jyn Erso's
Yeah, I think
dad,
doesn't Galen? Yeah, Galen, doesn't he say in that hologram transmission? Pretty much any firing into that hole will blow up the Death Star and create a chain reaction. He does. I mean, he does not make it sound. No, he doesn't. He doesn't say that. But he doesn't make it sound quite a feat as General Dodonna does in A New Hope. You know, when they say, "Oh, that's 1 in a million," and Han says, "Oh, great shot, kid. That's 1 in a million." It's not portrayed quite as such a feat, I don't think, by Galen in Rogue One. I'd have to go back and listen to it again, but it did strike me. And the other thing, you know, Luke's like, that's nothing. I used to bullseye womp rats, you know, in my T-16. You know, they're no bigger than, how many meters?
Well, yeah, you know, Fake Wedge says. That is Fake Wedge.
I know. Just makes me laugh.
If you guys don't know what Fake Wedge is, Google it. But Fake Wedge says, you know, that's impossible, even for a computer. And Luke is just immediately shoots him down. That's not impossible. I do it at home in my crappy jalopy, shooting womp rats. You know, and so I think that's kind of an early indication of Luke's Force abilities. He has always displayed them, you know.
He thinks it's normal.
Feats. He thinks it's he certainly knows it's doable.
Right.
But how many of his peers in Tatooine were able to do it? Luke was probably, and knowing Luke, he was probably always alone when it happened.
Oh, sure. Right.
Yeah, I bullseyed this thing in my T-16. Oh, sure you did, Wormy.
Yes,
sure
right.
you did. Sure you did.
Yeah, because he wouldn't have been such a loser to those other kids if they'd see him pull off this crazy stuff. You know?
Come on, I did it. Right, Wormy. They called him Wormy.
Oh, yeah.
So just, you know, that was the Force also working in mysterious ways, hiding Luke's Force abilities from others, only exposing itself to Luke every once in a while. Luke just thought it was luck or just, you know, look at what I could do. But he already knew he was a good pilot. I think Luke had already the confidence, much like Anakin did in his youth.
Yeah, he says
by the time he was discovered, he had already pulled off some wild stuff.
Who's going to fly it, kid? You bet I could. I'm not such a bad pilot myself. We don't have to listen to them.
Yeah, nobody's ever seen me fly.
Yeah.
It's one day, just one day. They're going to see me bullseye a womp rat. I swear to God I did it. Those anchorhead jerks.
Flying through hyperspace ain't like dusting crops, boy.
So that's a fun tangent we just went
on talking
about Luke, but it's a discussion of how his Force abilities emerged visibly to outsiders. And so we've seen little things that Omega's done, like shooting people, and she's shown a keen sense of perception. She's very observant, but none of that to me indicates that she can see things before they happen, things like of that nature.
Well, we did get into a discussion after the first episode because she says to Crosshair, I know what you're going to do and you can't help it and blah, blah, blah. So you could potentially make an argument. You could make a case that she was seeing things before they happen or was... See, I like to think that it's much more plausible that she knew or that her Force abilities or potential Force abilities allowed her to see that than her being that versed in the inhibitor chip. To me, that seems far more far-fetched. Why would they entrust this kid with that information?
Maybe she had access to that information and looked at it, and the other Kaminoans didn't have any knowledge of that.
Well, she was always knocking around, unsupervised in that lab.
Right, and she had access to the droids and the computers, and, I mean, maybe she just stumbled across it. Or maybe they did keep her in on things that were going on, not thinking she'd ever leave Kamino.
Right. Well, that's the thing we know for sure. We know for sure that they want her back. They're willing to hire bounty hunters, which tells me that they don't want to tell the Empire.
No.
So they don't want the Empire to know about her. So this is all behind the Empire's back. They want her back, and they want her back alive. So
I get the indication the Empire does know about her, but they don't know that she's on the loose.
Really? So
from something they say something at the end of the first episode, which I really, really desperately need a refresher on. We're halfway through the season now, and I have to see. We all need to go back and look at that first episode to see what seeds have been planted now, because there's more dots to connect.
For sure.
And I haven't gone back to it since week 1.
Yeah.
I think it's essential that by the time we're watching episode 9 this week and the Bad Batch after show and doing all that stuff, I'm going to have to watch episode 1. It's essential homework to me, because I believe they do say, well, our contingency plan is with them or something.
Right.
Like
yeah, they do. Right.
And doesn't one of the Kaminoans say, well, what if Tarkin finds out?
Something like that. Yeah.
Right? Or
yeah.
what if the Empire finds out? What if Tarkin finds out? I have to go back and look.
So good. Well, thanks for the voicemail. It was great discussion. And yes, put me down for wanting to believe that you could have more of a natural born or hatched or birthed clone with Force abilities. I don't know what you want to call it, but that the Force would find a way. I think it's very cool. Okay, news headlines.
I think they grow. They actually, they don't hatch them. I think they grow them.
Yeah, they do. They grow them in a tube. All right, headlines coming your way.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
All right, as Jim said, we are halfway through the Bad Batch. So if you've been watching the Disney Plus series, we're coming up on, is it episode 9? Episode 9 this week. So, and am I to take from the fact that we're looking at episode titles, episodes 10 through 14, that they're going to quit at 14? Is it? Because it was rumored that there would be 16 episodes. Now it's looking like 14.
Is it looking like 14?
Well, according to this, we've got. Where did you find these episode titles?
Well, there were just the next group of episodes. It didn't say like this is the remainder of the season.
Oh, where does this? Where do these names come from?
Well, I don't know. They're just floating around somewhere. I found them and put them there.
Okay.
It was revealed somewhere.
Okay, it was revealed. It was revealed somewhere. The next, at least the episode names for episodes 10 through 14. So let's go down here. So episode 10 is called Common Ground.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go. We'll hit these and then we'll go back and speculate what this might be. Episode 11, Devil's Deal. Episode 12, Rescue on Ryloth. Episode 13, Infested. And episode 14, War Mantle. All right. So, Jim, where we last left the Bad Batch, Omega had been taken.
Yes.
And we can assume now is on her way into the, in the clutches. Common Ground. That episode, following what we've seen so far.
We have episode 9 coming this week.
We do have episode 9. That's
so
right.
that remains a mystery title.
All right.
But
okay, yeah.
So we have Common Ground, which could indicate that the Bad Batch will be striking an alliance with somebody.
Yeah.
Because, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that sort of thing. Common ground.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think they'll forge an alliance with someone in that episode. That's my guess.
Common ground, yeah. I agree. Yes, they are gonna forge some sort of relationship. But then you got Devil's Deal, which would imply that, there's some kind of trade or something. And, you got to assume that it has to deal with Omega, that they're basically going to make a deal with the devil to get Omega back. And what might that be? What would they give up?
Good question. What do they have to give up? What kind of assets do the Bad Batch have? They barely even have any money. They don't have identities. They're off the grid. They don't have chain codes. So it's difficult for them to get around. They have their ship.
Okay, I've got a thought. Common ground is establishing common ground with the Kaminoans, particularly Nala Se. I think that could be where they're going to find the common ground, because they both, if you think about it, Nala Se has almost like a maternal connection to Omega. The Bad Batch have taken great care of her. Omega's a big fan of the Bad Batchers, especially Hunter and Wrecker. So could Nala Se, could she perhaps realize that Omega has a better chance of survival, staying safe, staying protected, and then coming back at some point to be the contingency plan that they need or that they want if she strikes, if she finds the common ground with the Bad Batch? And then we get to this Devil's Deal, and maybe there's something. So instead of the deal being made with the Empire, it could be a deal that's being made with the Kaminoans. Maybe the Prime Minister.
Be a deal getting made with Cad Bane. Cad Bane's the devil, maybe. Or maybe another character gets inserted into the story, and he takes possession of Omega. You're jumping to the conclusion that Omega makes it back to Kamino.
Right.
But she could be intersected along the way. Depends.
That's true.
How many bounty hunters are out there? Because because one bounty hunter has Omega, guy who's considered one of the best, but there are other bounty hunters out there, and they have been hired, and they might, get into a war themselves over the possession of Omega. The deal's not done yet.
Right.
That's currently what's going on in the Marvel series. Is they're doing a crossover event called War of the Bounty Hunters, and it's all about the story between Empire and Jedi, Boba Fett trying to deliver the carbonite slab of Han Solo to Jabba the Hutt, and running into problems along the way. Kind of like Shadows of the Empire, but a different take. All the bounty hunters are after Boba Fett,
because he's got the prize.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's what the War of the Bounty Hunters is all about.
Interesting. Yeah, so you're right. I am making the conclusion that it's going to be a fairly quick handoff of Omega from Cad Bane to the Kaminoans. That may not be the case at all. You're right. And perhaps, perhaps common ground is the Bad Batch striking a deal with Fennec Shan to find Cad Bane.
That could be.
So we can assume that Rescue on Ryloth is going to be the moment when they get Omega back. Of course, Ryloth being the home world of the Twi'leks. So we might be looking at 3 episodes, episodes 9, 10, and 11 before we get some conclusion on Omega.
It's possible, as Mark Hamill would say. It's possible. Then we jump into episode 13, Infested. Didn't Clint Howard once yell, "I'm infested! I'm infested!" Solo's Clint Howard. The real star of Solo, A Star Wars Story, was Clint Howard. Make no mistake of that. Infested. So that could be some sort of bug they put into the inhibitor chips, and we start seeing clones begin to drop across the galaxy because Tarkin has created a virus for the inhibitor chips to try to push forward his idea of enlisted soldiers instead of clones. So he is going to make the clones malfunction. Not all of them, but he'll introduce a virus that will be picked up by those inhibitor chips. That's total. I just made that up, guys. I'm not saying that's going to happen.
I see where you pulled that out of.
Yeah. You know what I pulled that out of.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
and,
but wait a minute, though. You might not be that far off base, because the next episode is War Mantle. And we know that Project War Mantle is the initiative of filling out the ranks of the Imperial Army with conscripted soldiers versus the clone army. So the fact that the episode previous, Infested, could be some sort of, kind of big breakdown malfunction of the clone army. It's not too far off base, which then leads you to War Mantle. So I would
love to see a stormtrooper clone trooper civil war. That would be a dream come true. I think that would be a lot of fun. I don't know if the series is heading in that direction, or if any of the speculation we just made on these rumored titles is correct. I don't even know if these rumored titles are correct. I mean, this is all just. But at least we won't know for another week, because episode 9 is coming this week. So
still a mystery.
So the shelf life of this podcast is officially 8 days.
What of the
until it expires?
What of the speculation are you willing to double down on? What do you feel like for? Not certainty. We don't know anything for certain. You're not willing to commit to anything.
No. It's all just fun guessing games at this point. I can't throw down for anything, because I'll be so frustrated then if it doesn't happen. So I'll I'll just be like, easy breezy about it. I don't want to.
Yeah, don't get cocky. Well, there's a few things that I mentioned that I think are likely to happen, but not like you. I have no idea. So Jim, the last couple of weeks we have shared photos, supposed location set photos from what Agent Kitster, our intrepid spy, believes to be the third episode of the Kenobi series, codenamed. What was the code name?
Pilgrim. He thought that it was Chapter 3 Pilgrim.
Yeah, Chapter 3.
Which was part of the Kenobi series.
Right.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have reached out and told us, people who have inside sources, they've confirmed that Pilgrim is the shooting title, the production code name for Andor, not Kenobi. So I just think this is a case of a certain guy who's working on these productions, and he's moving around from working on one that he knows is codename Pilgrim. And so maybe some of the crew is rumoring about, they're saying, oh yeah, this is Kenobi. This is going to be for Kenobi. And maybe it is. Maybe some shots are happening in England for Kenobi. But we know the majority of the footage is going to be shot in LA. Yeah. So you got a guy out there who's bouncing around from working on something codenamed Pilgrim. He's going to go work on the Indiana Jones show. And he might have access to other sort of production material for other sort of productions like Kenobi. Yeah. That's how I think we came across those production photos of the wardrobe.
Yeah, because if you look at this, it's not a stretch to think that these. Well, I'm actually showing them for the all access tier of our Patreon supporters. But what we're looking at is the 6 photos that seem to be the kind of wardrobe production photos, reference photos. And I look at this and I think, wow, that okay, especially that one trekking where it's clearly robes. There might be like a furry hood and some sort of a hat or something that goes with it. But it's not a stretch to think that it could be Jedi robes or a derivative of some sort of Jedi robe. But when you look at this in the context of Andor, it's like, yeah, I could kind of see that too. So
yes, for sure. Yeah. But Andor and Kenobi happening at the same point on the Star Wars timeline, essentially.
Oh, here's a thought.
Right?
Well,
am I right? I think I am. I
yeah.
think Kenobi takes place.
Yep.
Kenobi takes place 8 to 10 years before Star Wars: A New Hope. And Andor clearly takes place prior to the events of A New Hope. Maybe it's closer. Maybe that's 10, like 5 year. Maybe that's a 5-year thing. But the aesthetic of the Empire has taken over dominance in the galaxy. It didn't take long. We're seeing it in the Bad Batch. It did not take long for the Empire to sink its fangs into the galaxy and start forcing a lot of oppression on people. And you see it. You see it in their fashion. You see it in their environments.
Well, there's even a Kenobi reference in Rogue One between Mon Mothma and Bail Organa.
Right.
Should we contact our friend? I think they say our friend on. Did they even say our friend on Tatooine or something like that? I can't remember the line exactly, but they're clearly referring to Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I'm wondering, could
hey, that Jedi,
yes,
you still got his cell phone number? Yeah,
shoot him a text.
We'll send my daughter. Yeah, shoot him a text. We'll send Leia out there we'll Uber Leia out to him.
Well, but could there be some sort of crossover event between those two series?
I think there's a strong possibility of that. So maybe
it
just depends on where Andor happens in the timeline. Do we know when exactly Andor happens in the timeline? Yeah, we have Diego Luna, who's
5 years older than he was.
Yeah, so we have to assume it's within range of Rogue One. So I would say 5 years for Andor. Mm-hmm. That seems realistic to me.
Yeah, I agree. But nonetheless, we did learn what the code name for the Kenobi series is.
Right, yes. And this may have been reported elsewhere on the internet, but we had somebody in the know reach out to us and confirm the code name, the production code name for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series is Joshua Tree. Any U2 fans out there? U2 fans? Joshua Tree. So... Yeah.
I always, I'm kind of bummed because I thought Pilgrim was a really cool code name for Kenobi.
Mm-hmm.
Had that Western kind of thing going on, and to me, and thinking of Kenobi as being that kind of relic of the old West out there knocking around in the cantinas. But anyway, Joshua Tree works too. That's fine.
What is the Joshua Tree? I know it's the name of a U2 album, but what is the Joshua Tree?
Well, there's a national park. I know that.
Joshua Tree Natural Park?
Yeah, where two deserts meet. Two distinct desert ecosystems, the Mojave and the Colorado, come together in the Joshua Tree National Park.
Interesting. Close to Death Valley, where scenes from Star Wars: A New Hope was shot. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's a nod to when they shot those scenes with the droids in Death Valley.
Yeah. They also, the tree itself is a yucca tree. And they do have they almost look like a big bonsai tree, the way that they grow, or the way you see some bonsai trees sort of groomed, where you only have the foliage on the outermost part, and so the big branches are naked. So I don't know, but I think it probably has more to do with the two deserts meeting. So I don't think there's much to glean from the title, really, any more than, Blue Harvest. But it's fun to speculate. It may not mean
Blue
anything.
Harvest had zero connection.
Right.
To Return of the Jedi, other than being a cool sounding name.
It is a cool name. All right, Emilia Clarke in the news. Emilia Clarke, of course, from Solo.
Yes.
Played Kara. Was that
Kira?
Kira, that's it. Kira. Yeah. Again, those names have a hard time. They don't really stick with me. But anyway, she was on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, and I'm assuming, Jim, since you're bringing us the audio clips here, that Star Wars came up during her clips?
Of course it did, yes. Josh Horowitz did the interview. He's a big Star Wars fan. Never misses the opportunity to talk Star Wars with anyone he's interviewing who has a connection to the saga. And as we know, Emilia Clarke did play Kira, Han Solo's love interest turned mafioso warlord. Didn't see that coming.
No.
And didn't see Darth Maul coming from, even though he was right in front of my face. I still didn't. I still can't believe he was in that movie. But let's not go off on a tangent. Let's focus on Emilia Clarke in her interview with Josh Horowitz. She discussed that she's happy to learn that Solo, a Star Wars story, despite having a lackluster box office performance, the fans have embraced it, and it seems like it's aging well.
I loved Kira. Loved her. I really, really did. I loved Han. I loved the story. I loved the people. I loved the experience. It was, I feel like it was one of those ones where, when you know too much about a celebrity, and you go and watch that movie and you're just thinking about how many kids Angelina Jolie has. And I feel like our movie was that. Like, everyone went in knowing what our dirty laundry looked like. And so therefore the separation, I think, was too great. You couldn't then separate that gossip from the overall experience. But I am so over the moon that people are posthumously enjoying it.
Posthumously. That's interesting. That she firmly puts the blame on Solo's poor box office on the bad press the film was receiving during production.
Well, and it was bad.
Yeah.
The press was terrible on that, and it was managed terribly, honestly. Mm-hmm. I think there were things that they could have done to mitigate that. Jim, we waited forever to get a glimpse of the movie, if you recall. The trailer that never it seemed like it was never going to come.
The marketing was slow to the gate, and I think that has to do with Rogue One, because the Rogue One film changed so drastically during its production that trailers were released that had a majority of the footage never ended up in the final film.
Some of the footage was made specifically for the trailer.
Well, now we've heard that.
We've heard that, yeah. Mm-hmm. We didn't know that at the time.
Same thing with The Force Awakens. There were several shots in that trailer that didn't end up in the final film. So I think with the fact that everything was just so fluid all the time, they didn't know what was going to end up in the can at the end of the day. So they were being cautious with the marketing for Solo. Also because they had blown their load spending so much marketing The Last Jedi just months prior.
Right.
So maybe...
Which left retailers unhappy because the merch did not move like Force Awakens merch was flying.
No.
Was flying.
Right. So all of those factors come into play. I personally blame the timing of the Solo film. It was the Star Wars film nobody wanted. Maybe 10 years down the road, it would have been different. But I think the fact that Harrison Ford's Han Solo was just killed off a few years prior in The Force Awakens made the timing just wrong. And I think they were eyeballing a secondary franchise with Solo. That's why they were laying the seeds for the Crimson Dawn and Darth Maul and Han's next job that they were going to on Tatooine, all that stuff. They were clearly eyeballing a sequel that never happened. It's not going to happen. It's possible the fan base can continue to show support, and maybe Disney will listen and create a Disney Plus series for it if all of the principles are available.
Well, the Book of Boba Fett in that format being 6 episodes, and all signs pointing to a one and done in terms of season. I wonder if that might be a bit of an experiment in some ways of how can we tell some of these stories we want to tell without committing to a multi-season series. And so maybe Book of Boba Fett will be a template for things like a potential follow-up to Solo.
It's possible. It's possible.
Or could the Lando series do that? We don't know anything about the Lando series.
We really don't know.
So you've got a movie called Solo, and now you're going to have perhaps a Disney Plus miniseries called Lando, which could potentially might tell.
Yeah, but there's no guarantees that it's going to be set in the Donald Glover Lando era either.
No, but there's no guarantee that it's not either.
Some seeds were planted for a potential Lando series at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, when you had, let's find out.
Yeah, I don't think they're going there, man. I think the sequel trilogy era, particularly the post-sequel trilogy era, I don't see there being any push to go back there, not from the fans and not from Disney.
I don't know. I think Rogue Squadron will be set firmly in the sequel trilogy era. And that's the next film coming from Star Wars. So I think that era is going to be explored further.
Boy, man, that would be, for me, that would be disappointing because I have absolutely no connection to those pilots from the sequel trilogy. None of them.
Possibly I think, I'm just saying in the sequel trilogy era. I'm not saying it's going to be the same pilots or anything like that. And also, the Kevin Feige film could also be placed in that era. Maybe even Taika's.
Yeah, it's possible.
Although, because Taika, when KK was doing the Investors Day presentation last December, and she briefly talked about Taika Waititi's Star Wars film, they showed a Star Wars logo never seen before that looked a lot like the Ben-Hur logo. So it leads speculation toward a place where you're thinking, is Taika's film going to feature, chariots and gladiators and things of that nature, Because that's the only hint we've had. Taika Waititi recently said that now that he's wrapping up the next Thor film, apparently principal shooting is wrapped on that, and now he's in post-production and editing. Apparently he said his next project is going to be the Star Wars. So maybe Taika's film, and also we know Kevin Feige, he's got a writer working on that film already and everything, so it's possible the next 3 Star Wars films could be placed in the sequel era. But again, the Taika thing makes you think you're going back in time just because of that logo.
Yeah,
that's the only. That is the only hint we have at this point.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna beat it into the ground.
Yeah, it almost looks
there.
Like,
it is. You found it.
Yeah, it almost looks like Star Wars BC.
Yeah.
It's got a prehistoric kind of look. I have no memory of seeing this. I mean, my first thought is that this could be, when you talk about going back in time, we could be looking at a Knights of the Old Republic. They're dying to make that happen. They're absolutely dying to make that happen. They know that there's a pretty fervent fan base for those games and in that era. But anyway, getting back to the Emilia Clarke interview. So we we heard her take on why Solo may have suffered the fate that it did, and what else did she have to say?
Well, you brought up the Solo series, and I think Josh Horowitz is also thinking in a similar fashion that it's possible some of the Han Solo story could be told in the Lando series. So he asks if she's been contacted and if she's going to be appearing in that show.
As if she could say yes.
I have heard nothing. I mean, and I really this isn't me going, oh my God, what am I allowed to say? Absolutely nothing. But a Lando show makes so much sense. Give that man his own show.
So she's
which
heard
man?
Nothing. Lando, she's saying.
Yeah, I know, but which Lando?
Yeah, right. Billy D, who is the only Lando, as we heard last week in Star Wars and pop culture.
That's right.
It's so perfect. But Kira is back talking about the comic book series that I brought up earlier, the big crossover event, War of the Bounty Hunters. Kira has made an appearance. She's alive and well and still in charge of Crimson Dawn during the period between Empire and Jedi. She's just made her presence known. Yeah. Yeah. Apparently, Crimson Dawn has been off the radar for a while, off the charts, off the grid. They haven't been operational in a while. So nobody's really heard much from them. And now they've made their
Boy,
return.
that's really surprising to me, Jim, that they would commit her character that far into the timeline post Solo. So really, I mean, yes, I'm sure she's had all kinds of crazy adventures, but it kind of takes certain things off the table a bit, doesn't it? Don't you think that Kira's story, some of the things that they could have said or could have happened to Kira? I mean, there's no redemption. There's no her turning her back on her criminal life. Likely not even a reunion of her in Han Solo. If she's, not seen until in between the events of Empire and Jedi. I'm very surprised by that move with that character.
Yeah, and beyond that, she's teaming up with Jabba the Hutt, apparently. So we'll see how that goes. And she seems very cold and emotionless about Han. Knowing Han's frozen in carbonite and everything else.
Interesting.
Doesn't care.
Wow. That's going to be... no one tell him when he wakes up from carbonite. No, it's better if he doesn't know the way she was acting before, before he got thawed out. You don't want to know that, one of the loves of your life doesn't care about you at all.
Yeah, poor guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's, barely even connected with Leia at this point either. So he's just, all he's got is Chewbacca. And that just doesn't fill the void. So War of the Bounty Hunters, I brought it up a couple times. It seems like it's a fun thing. It's going to rock us at least through the summer with this big crossover going on. All the Star Wars titles are part of this story. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And you piqued my curiosity. Well, I always loved Shadows of the Empire. I've always really loved that era in between Empire. Well, the era between the original trilogy films, whether it be between Star Wars and Empire, but particularly between Empire and Jedi. Very, very interesting. Has there been an appearance by Kyle Katarn by chance? So there's no attempt to canonize him in the new era?
Not yet, no. Definitely not, no.
And what was his ship? The Outlander? The Outrider?
Oh,
something
I
Rider?
think you are thinking of Dash Rendar.
Dash Rendar, not Kyle Katarn. Yeah. Dash Rendar.
Yeah, Kyle Katarn was from the Dark Forces video games. And Dash Rendar was from the Empire.
The Shadows of the Empire. He was kind of like Han Solo light. A little bit. He had kind of a Han.
Right. They freeze Han in carbonite, and then they just come up with sort of a carbon copy of him.
A little bit.
To
well, it was Leia. It was Leia's rebound man.
Well, they should have just gone with Indiana Jones.
You look so familiar. Hey, while we're on the topic of Disney Star Wars, this article came across my desk, and There are some things about it that I found really fascinating. So it's by Spencer Kornhaber. This comes from the Atlantic magazine. And I got to say, the headline sounds like it's something that should have been or could have been written 2 years ago when we first saw The Mandalorian hit Disney Plus. But how Disney mismanaged the Star Wars universe and how The Mandalorian can restore the true power of George Lucas's galaxy. So 2 years later, Spencer's getting around to writing this. And here's what really intrigued me. Was oftentimes when you read an analysis, whether it be a takedown or a shilling for Disney Star Wars or Star Wars in the Disney era, it gets very political and it gets ugly. A lot of real world things are brought into the discussion. What's fascinating about this piece by Spencer is that it's none of that enters into this. What he talks about, I just want to take some of these ideas piece by piece, Jim, it's fascinating. He says, for example, Lucas's reverse-engineered fairy tale resonated with audiences, but Star Wars aficionados tend to overrate plot when explaining his success. Books have been written about the profundity of Luke's search for identity. And then he cites this new book. It's an oral history of the making of Star Wars, where they argue that Lucas's most significant creative decision in crafting the script was to draw from myths. Disney's chief Star Wars executive, Kathleen Kennedy, says, what was really important to Lucas, and certainly important to me, was story. Whenever Star Wars films have faltered with audiences, commentators have blamed shoddy storytelling, the needless complexity of Lucas's prequels, the inconsistent logic of Disney's sequels. Yet the hero's journey in the original movies was always sketchy. The opening 15 minutes of A New Hope feature strikingly few recognizable human characters, and Luke Skywalker is usually the least interesting thing in any scene that follows. A lot of the film's suspense derives more from wondering what the movie's about, the touristic curiosity of where is this going, than from tracking clues to how Luke will fulfill his destiny. And he goes on, but what my takeaway from that is that while George may have been giving us a new version of the hero's journey, he hit it so well behind the world building and everything surrounding the characters that it wasn't an obvious exercise in doing that. Whereas the stuff that's come after, particularly with Disney, is all about trying to kind of hit you over the head of, we're mythological too. We're just like George. We're just, whereas he almost is saying that it was sort of an afterthought when it comes to George and the original story.
I think that George, the best thing he did was he gave us a character that just about anyone can see themselves in, with Luke Skywalker. Yearning for adventure, wants to leave the family farm. We all have elements of that in our lives growing up. It's natural. I have kids in my house, 18 and 21, 22. And really, they are looking forward more than anything, thinking about their future. Where are they going to live? How are they going to take care of themselves? What are they going to do for an occupation? All of that. That's their adventure, they're yearning for. So I think everyone sees themselves in Luke Skywalker. And he was the vehicle for which the whole story was told through his perspective. So having a character we can all root for and see ourselves in, and then put him in this wild and crazy situation where he is forced to leave the nest. He's thrown out of he's the bird that gets thrown out of the nest, doesn't want to leave, but he gets thrown out. He wants to leave. He knows he needs to fly, spread his wings and fly, but everything ties him down. That's your uncle speaking. That's where I think George hits the home run every time, is with the characters And then the story, obviously he's so brilliant at the world building and everything. And then the visual stuff, he's extremely gifted in that department as well. So he just threw it all into a pot and stirred it up. And we got Star Wars. And it was a risk for him. He didn't know what he was doing. He did not. That's the newsflash. George didn't know what he was doing. He was creating. He was building. And then
that's a dangerous place to go, because critics, apologists for some Star Wars, and apologizing for some Star Wars often ends up in criticizing the rest of it. So what often happens is the defenders of, say, the sequel trilogy, and if you love the sequel trilogy, it's fine. It's not. What I'm saying is sometimes the sequel trilogy defenders defend it by tearing down the original and saying, well, George's wasn't much better. Well, George didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah, but George was creating it.
Yeah,
he left. When he left, it was created. Okay. So now you just don't take it and be like, whoa, what do I do with this? I don't know. The blueprints are already there,
Yeah.
It's you have to have some kind of knowledge coming into it, You're not going to build a baseball team around a bunch of people who can't swing a bat. You have to at least come in with some sort of credentials, a high batting average.
Well, some would argue that J.J. Abrams, had massive credentials.
But J.J. was tied down by so many cooks in the kitchen.
Well, yeah.
That's what George didn't have to deal with that. George carved his own path and was able to take the risks he wanted to take.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get enough credit for that.
The Spencer goes on here and he talks about, some of the sort of the iconic moments of the hero's journey almost didn't happen. So he's using this as a way of kind of saying that wasn't really driving. It's unclear that was really what was driving George in the first film. He says in the shooting script for A New Hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi survives to the end rather than dying midway through, which is his passing is very much part of the hero's journey, where the older mentor dies. Some drafts of Empire Strikes Back don't indicate that Darth Vader is Luke's father. Glorious as such surprises are, Lucas's work wasn't driven by them. So what he's saying is, where the mystery box, the J.J. Abrams mystery box, we got to have a big reveal. I mean, you yourself, I think, said one time, like, why does Rey have to be anybody, or why does there have to be a connection at all? Why are you just retelling? They're all searching for the "I am your father" moment, is what you were saying.
Yeah, they all want that big reveal.
And that big reveal.
It's not about the story anymore. It's about the big, shocking reveal.
Yes. And that's what this guy is saying, that George wasn't motivated by the big reveal. He says, no. In fact, the story crescendos are compelling because they double as world building. Learning who Darth Vader really is raises a host of tantalizing questions about the history of the galaxy, for example. Not the least of which, how does someone become Darth Vader? Kenobi's early movie references to mysterious concepts such as the Dark Times, exposition left unfinished once he dies, also sparks rich intrigue. And he says, Lucas makes movies that are intentionally designed to have holes in them that need to be filled in later. He's right about one thing. But do they need to be filled in? Many a mediocre Star Wars product has arisen from trying to define every entry in the galactic glossary. The original films work precisely because of the holes.
Right.
Interesting take. Too much detail? Perhaps.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. It doesn't all need to be defined. It needs to be left open to interpretation. That's how so many different people from so many diverse parts of the world love Star Wars, is because they can fill in the blanks themselves. They can interpret it. They can draw their own conclusions. It's not all spelled out for you. It's not all a page on Wikipedia. It's left open to interpretation. That's what has made Star Wars so beloved and adored forever. Since George has left, we've dealt with some yahoos who try to over-explain every little nuance of Star Wars, every little beat, every little mention of anything. It has to fit in this nice, tidy little box. And Lucas knew how to play that game, and he knew how to work it. So you can look at Star Wars and assume what you want to about it without someone telling you a textbook definition of what it's supposed to be. That concept would make George Lucas puke. And, you know, that's what art's all about, right? Is the individual's interpretation. No definition. No definition. That's why real artists don't like to explain themselves. That's why George Lucas, when you ask him specific questions about Star Wars to this day, he'll say, it means whatever you think it means.
Yes.
That's the universal glory of Star Wars.
But it is interesting to look at, you know, in retrospect, how much was George aware of what he was of what he was doing, and have the people that are trying to make Star Wars now has their misunderstanding of what George was doing and what he knew he was doing at the time or thought he was doing at the time, has that led to some of these miscalculations? He talks about how fastidious George was about blending novelty with naturalism. He talks about how the sets had to be streaked with scum and scorch marks. And in fact, he even quotes Liam Neeson here talking about when he was, going back and reviewing the original films leading up to playing Qui-Gon. He says, these actors believed the world that they were in. Mark Hamill jumps into his speeder and poof, he's off. To them, it was everyday stuff. And such far-out realism has rarely been achieved since then. The prequels, according to this guy, are dreary. Lucas went overboard with the then novel computer-generated imagery, losing the lived-in feel he once prized, and the Disney sequels are too frantically paced and too packed with winks to the old films for viewers to settle in with the new sets, creatures, and costumes.
Oh, cry me a river.
You're not buying that one?
I don't accept the condemnation of the prequel trilogy.
Oh, he's just drawing a parallel between, the original trilogy having that lived in reality and then, sort of the sterility of the prequel trilogy. But I always felt George was very upfront about the differences between the two looks.
Yeah.
George didn't accidentally create or wasn't just so fascinated with CG that he was unable to create that lived in universe. He didn't want the lived in universe. That wasn't the story.
He wanted the prequel era to represent a more of a Art Deco vibe. He wanted that to be more prominent in the culture of the prequels, to go to different planets and stuff and see different civilizations and how they live. I think George did an amazing job. He didn't retread stuff in the prequels. He created new stuff. He enriched his entire universe with his world building in the prequels, which I think was on a scale much more massive than that of the original trilogy. The original trilogy, he invented everything. The prequel trilogy, he pushed things. He pushed the envelope. He built upon the world building he'd already done. And there was some reinventing going on and stuff, but he wasn't retreading. It didn't feel cheap and hollow. I thought it felt rich and expansive. It was an expansion. And then if you want your used universe, we made several visits back to Tatooine during the prequel trilogy.
Right.
And it felt like a homecoming. It did. It felt like a homecoming. But, man, I wouldn't give up those exotic planets from the prequel trilogy for anything. Coruscant and Naboo. I mean, Naboo itself is just a cinematic achievement.
He's talking about the rise and fall of the galaxy. So,
right.
So I like a lot of what I like the questions that Spencer is asking in here, but I do agree with you. I think he got it wrong. George didn't lose the lived-in feel that he once prized. It was a deliberate choice to create a juxtaposition of the world pre-Empire and the world post-Empire.
And you start seeing more of the original trilogy aesthetics as you got toward the end of Revenge of the Sith, going to that volcanic power plant on Mustafar. That had OT vibes, if you ask me. It didn't look all shiny and glossy. Neither did the droid factory on Geonosis. Camino. What a wild and crazy environment that was. You're telling me that's not Star Wars? Come on.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. One other comment, he says, when Star Wars goes bad, it's a galaxy that feels like a thing on a screen and not a place you can go.
Okay, well, this cat obviously doesn't like the prequels, so what would be a place? Wait, when Star Wars goes bad, it's a galaxy that feels like a thing on a screen and not a place you can go.
So it's not immersive. It's not relatable. But this is all to build up what he says about the Mandalorian. He says the world of the Mandalorian, thankfully, is sturdy. It's like well-worn concrete. The hero flies a rickety spaceship modeled on a 70s warplane. Baby Yoda's twitching puppet ears convey the expressive range of actual toddlers. Most important, showrunner Jon Favreau has absorbed the take-your-time, exploratory ethos of Lucas's first trilogy. One early episode spends 10 dialogue-free minutes following the Mandalorian as he tries to survive on an arid planet. Two episodes later, the Mandalorian arrives in a forested village where locals harvest bioluminescent krill from ponds. He doesn't just save the village from a hostile tribe's attack. He moves in to live the Star Wars simple life for a few weeks. So that's the other thing that he's drawing a couple of parallels. One, the sequel trilogy was too frantic, tried to potentially to tell too much story in too little time, and The Mandalorian is taking its time. It's leading you through the universe and the events bit by bit, more like George's A New Hope did, where it wasn't beating you over the head with the hero's journey. It was that was happening, but it was secondary. You were exploring this universe. And then, he uses the same things sort of as a takedown with the prequels, with the not having the lived in universe. But I think we've, sort of discredited that. But
I think this guy really is attracted to beyond the Campbell elements that George Lucas introduced to Star Wars. I think this guy really loves the old Western elements that George has introduced to Star Wars. He doesn't address it in this article necessarily, but that is, I think, the thing that really appeals to this guy is George Lucas's influence by old Western movies. And that's the stuff that really fuels The Mandalorian. Now, the reason The Mandalorian works and the pacing works so well on it is because Favreau has thought it out. Beginning, middle, and end. He created an outline, and he's sticking to the outline. And he is one guy. There's no pass the baton business going on here. Let's get flavor of the week filmmaker in here and pass the baton to him. Let's get quirky auteur filmmaker in here and pass the baton on to him. And then watch him just shred the fan base on Twitter. No, thank you. Still licking the wounds, ladies and gentlemen.
Well,
here we are, mid-2021, and I swore to myself that by the time the year is over, I'm never going to look back at that again.
There's a lot more to the article, how Disney mismanaged the Star Wars universe, and I recommend it only because it's a very intelligent, laid out piece that is not trying to be inflammatory. It's not trying to get political. It's just looking at elements of storytelling and, George's visual language that he established with the original trilogy, and then, how it evolved into the prequels and then the sequels. And anyway, yes, I don't agree with everything, but I certainly welcome that kind of dialogue anytime it's offered in the Star Wars universe. Yeah.
It's fun. Good for him.
So, all right. What do we got?
We got Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson. Is he back in the news? What's going on with Liam?
Well, Liam, he's out there, and he's promoting his new film, The Ice Road. Oh, yeah, sure, it's a road. There's ice. It's an ice road. What are you going to do? So he's out there. Boy, is Liam out there sometimes. But listen, we love Liam Neeson here on Rebel Force Radio, and I don't think we have to prove that to anyone. We pay tribute to him as often as we can, and if there is a Star Wars actor that I would like to go out drinking with, Liam Neeson is the guy. He is definitely the guy. But yes, he showed up recently on an Entertainment Reporter's YouTube show. The interviewer is a guy named Jake, and he has a channel on YouTube called Jake's Takes. Jake Hamilton is the guy. I think we may have featured his interviews in the past. He's a big Star Wars fan. He makes no bones about it. And he got to sit down with Liam Neeson during a junket to talk about the Ice Road. And good old Jake, doing what any good Star Wars fan should do, he peppered Liam Neeson with some Star Wars questions and specifically asked him, what advice would the spirit of Qui-Gon Jinn give to Obi-Wan Kenobi? Under the premise of, I know you can't talk about the Kenobi series,
right? And
you've already denied that you're in it. But just in case you might be in it, thinking maybe Liam will crack. Oh, what the hell? Kid, I'm in it, No, it's Liam would never do that.
No.
Liam would never, because Liam really doesn't know what he's doing half the time. Everything's a murder drama, is what they tell him. His family's been kidnapped. Well, I'm wearing these Jedi robes again now, The family's been kidnapped. Don't worry about it, Liam. Just say your lines. So here he is. He's talking to Jake, and he answers Jake's question. It's pretty funny. He gives Jake a great answer about what the spirit of Qui-Gon Jinn would say to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I know in the last Star Wars film, I forget the name of it, I did record, a few of us, I think Sam Jackson, myself, a few others, we recorded little lines. That's a good question. What would I say? I mean, I was in the Phantom Menace. That was what, 23, 24?
22 years ago.
Keep on trucking, Obi-Wan, I guess. Keep on trucking, baby. And may the Force be with you always.
Oh, I just love it. Trucking with Liam Neeson. Keep trucking. So he says, keep on trucking, but he gives us just a great soundbite there at the end.
Keep on trucking, baby. And may the Force be with you always.
Yeah. I love
if there's a God in heaven, we're going to hear that in the Kenobi series.
Keep on trucking, baby.
I love it.
Keep on trucking, baby. And may the Force be with you always.
Oh, it's so good. All right. Star Wars Slow Tell is back, ladies and gentlemen. It was the smash hit of summer 2018 here on Rebel Force Radio, and now it's back. It always shows up in the summertime. Have you noticed that, Jason?
I have noticed that. I don't know why, but there's something in the water, I guess.
So as you know, if you listen to last week's show, we had a lot of fun with another interview that Liam Neeson had recently done. And Liam, somehow I channeled Liam Neeson, as I sometimes do. And Liam Neeson and Swank had a little conversation there. And Bob Grippy on Facebook, on the Rebel Force Radio Facebook page, Dabolino Bob Grippy. He says, I demand slow and tell, Jimmy Max, Liam Neeson. So, ladies and gentlemen, what RFR Slow and Tell is we take audio sound bites of various Star Wars cast, crew, and notable personalities, and we take it down into the RFR Sound Lab and stretch it out a little bit, slow it down, so the person talking on the soundbite sounds like they're hammered. It's a lot of fun. So we took my voice, actually, my vocal track from last week's show. We put it in the RFR Sound Lab Slow and Tell machine, and this is what happened.
Oh, yeah, sure, you know. I heard something somewhere, like a little bird told me or something that Ewan is doing a series for the thing, you know. But no, I have not been approached. It would cost them a fortune, a bloody fortune. I want to break the bloody bank, you know. Star Wars is just a big old teat we suck upon, you know. And Liam wants his share. They come to me, Liam Neeson, one-stop shopping. You want Qui-Gon? There's only one place to go, and it'll cost you. I'm telling you, Swank, you gotta go tell those cheap bastards at Lucasfilm to cough up the cash, 'cause you know my motto, Swank. No per diem, no Liam. Yeah, sure, you know. Swank, you little bastard, you.
This is when things start to turn dark. Wow. You know, when you slow it down, it sounds even more like the real Liam Neeson. It's incredible. I was
thinking that myself.
Yeah. So
next time I impersonate him, I'm going to just have to get wasted before I do it. It adds so much more authenticity to
You do sound like my uncle when he gets smashed, my drunk uncle, but that's another story. All right.
My drunk uncle.
Yeah, my drunkle. Everybody's got a drunkle. All right, Star Wars and pop culture coming up right now.
Rebel Force Radio.
You've already made that Star Wars reference.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars parody. What do we got?
This is something weird I found on Facebook. Are you able to access the link?
And
play it? Yeah, I got a link on the notebook, the show notebook.
All right.
And you should be able to click on that. And there's a video about a guy doing, I think he's reading the crawl, the crawl from the original Star Wars A New Hope. He's reading it, but he's countrified it. He's countrified it. He's put a little Nashville twist on it. And I thought it just sounded cool as hell. And the guy had a great set of pipes, and he really delivered.
Long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, it's a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire. During the battle, Rebel spies have managed to seal the secret plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star.
Oh man, nice. I love it. I feel like I'm watching the Dukes of Hazzard a little bit.
Right, yeah.
You know?
It definitely shades of Waylon Jennings.
Yeah.
That voice soaked in bourbon. Oh. And that's from, it's on TikTok, and it features a fiddle player, a banjo player, and our narrator who is holding a glass of whiskey.
Long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire. During the battle, Rebel spies have managed to seal the secret plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star.
It works. Man. Don_Sanders on TikTok. So you have a young girl there playing the fiddle.
The fiddle, yeah.
You have
not a violin,
young guy.
Fiddle.
No, that's fiddle. And you have a young guy playing the banjo. And then we have our whiskey-soaked narrator's voice. And I would listen to that guy recite anything.
Yeah, he's great.
I would.
He's great.
So, as they would say on Hee Haw, salute! And that comes from Rebel Force. You know, my whole life.
Contact me. Play back the entire message. What message? Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Send no reply. Now, my whole life, I've been waiting for the moment when I can practically apply the Hee Haw salute. Oh. And I finally had that opportunity. I'm so glad you were able to share it with me, Jason Swank, and our wonderful listening audience. Salute to you.
All right. Y'all. Well, we're going to salute one lucky listener here. We're going to play the voicemail. This is another Bad Batch question, and this pertains to Boba Fett and how Boba Fett might make an appearance in the Bad Batch.
Hey, Justin calling. Long-time listener, big fan, first-time caller, actually. So in the Bad Batch episode Rampage, something people aren't really talking about enough, I think, is the fact that in Sid's office, there's a white Mando bucket behind Wrecker in a couple of scenes on the wall. And then there's a pair of Westar 34 blasters above her office. Do we think this is some type of foreshadowing of Boba? I kind of got this vibe that then it could be, you know, like the Zam Wessel to Boba's Jango and the whole poetry it rhymes type of thing. Do we think that this could be kind of hinting that Boba is the one that was actually hired by the Kaminoans to get Omega, and that's leading him to hire Fennec? Let me know your thoughts, guys. Thanks.
All right, so there's a couple of questions here, Jim. The first is, could those items in Sid's bar be some sort of foreshadowing of Boba Fett?
Maybe.
I don't remember
the Mandalorian.
The Mando bucket.
There's a bucket. There is a bucket on the wall, but is it Mandalorian or is it Phase 1 clone trooper with the similar T visor?
Right. Blink and you miss it kind of thing?
Oh, in Sid's bar?
Or is it?
I only recall seeing it like in one shot, I think.
What about the Mando blasters? Now, clearly, they're not.
I didn't catch those.
You necessarily, they wouldn't, they could be any kind of blaster, I guess. But yeah, the Mandos tend to stick to that style of blaster, those sidearms. And then the second part of this is, what about a potential relationship between Fennec and Boba, which we know happens. We see them hanging out in the Mandalorian, but could the origin of that relationship be in Bad Batch, or might we already meet Boba Fett and Fennec after they've already established some sort of partnership? And I do like that I like what he's saying about when he's comparing it to Zam Wessel and Jango and Boba and Fennec. That's interesting.
Oh, right. Yeah, there was that partnership. True. That's true. I think we will see Boba Fett in the Bad Batch. I think we will see the seeds of the relationship between him and Fennec come to fruition. I love it all. I can't wait to see it. I hope it happens. That's, I have no insight other than I think we're definitely on the right track. I am prepared to be disappointed, though.
Yeah.
But would I be disappointed? It just depends on how great the story is here for the second half of the season. If it's a great story, you don't have to add any more characters. Great story is a great story.
Yeah.
But I think the opportunity is so amazing where you can put Boba Fett in there. Definitely his story from the Clone Wars is kind of unfinished.
Mm-hmm.
The last time we left him, he didn't have the Slave One.
Right.
He didn't even have his Mandalorian armor.
Right.
Which belonged to his father. He wasn't wearing it. He was wearing some other weird armor. Which is sort of an odd decision that the Clone Wars guys did to not give Boba that bucket early on.
Why complicate things any more than you have to?
It was that season 5 episode with Dengar and that High Singer droid. They had a bigger story they wanted to tell with Boba, and they didn't get the chance to.
Right.
Because George quit. Well, he sold the company, but
right.
Still, I mean, there were untied threads, loose threads. Can't have it. So I think a lot of the development that went into telling Boba's story in the Clone Wars will have to show up sooner or later somewhere. Book of Boba Fett, perhaps some of it. Bad Batch, great opportunity. So maybe they'll take it. Cad Bane showed up. So
yeah,
we're getting closer, I think.
You want to do one more? We've got one more voicemail here that I pulled. I thought it was pretty good. This is another Omega Palpatine theory.
Go for it.
Hey, Jimmy. Hey, Jason. This is Kyle from Tennessee calling. Chut. First time caller. I have a Bad Batch theory.
Mm-hmm.
What about the possibility of Omega being Rey's mother?
Yeah.
So
I've heard that.
I'm just thinking this because it seems like a lot of stuff they do in the shows are kind of either adding on or, dare I say, correcting some of the things that were done in the movies. So it seems like the time frame kind of works out, and you got the accents. And to me, it seems like Omega's character is a lot like Rey. She's very determined and capable. And then I thought I heard Jimmy say something about it's been confirmed that Palpatine's son is a clone. So
yeah,
you got Omega being a clone. I don't know. That's just my thought. I'd like to know what you guys think about it. Okay, thanks. Bye.
He was either a clone or he was artificially created. That's something that I think will be further explored in Star Wars. The act of cloning a person, taking one individual's DNA and creating a separate life from that DNA, that's cloning. But technology to artificially create people in a lab without using any sort of donor, that's something else too, And I think that's going to come into play. What the hell is a strand cast? That's what I'm talking about. That's specifically what I'm talking about. There's been terminology like strand cast and inferences that have been made that indicate it's different from cloning. So, and then, there's the whole Fennec Shan thing where I think she might have been an android way before that bounty hunter wannabe shot her in the stomach in season 1, episode 5 of The Mandalorian. I think she may have always been an android. And when Boba Fett went and reached down, he just turned her back on. She had, she had a trip switch that when her circuits became overloaded, she just shut down. Boba Fett went and turned her on.
We didn't...
Sorry, I just had to finish the sentence. And
no, I'm sorry. I didn't know where you're going, but I when you go back and you look at that moment, you don't see the frantic movements of somebody who just found his close, colleague, his partner dead. He's just slowly walking. You hear the spurs. He's walking around. You see no signs of panic or anything like, oh, I got to hurry up. I think when you first said that, Jim, I was like, I don't know about that. But the more I think about it, the more you say it, the more I think it's much more likely than he did some sort of quick emergency, saving, with the mechanics. I think it's much more likely that she was an android before.
And maybe he had her hooked up to a GPS or something, and he was able to see when she powered down. And
hey, speaking of android, I gotta say, and this was totally unplanned, but I'll spring it on you. So the other night, on Father's Day this past week, I had the greatest Father's Day present that a father could have. The whole family left the house. Whole family went out of town. No, they really did. It wasn't done on purpose. It just happened to be that the galaxy aligned in such a way. But so I'm hanging out. I'm dog sitting a friend. So I was hanging out on the porch. Put the projector on. Brought down the 100-inch screen, and put Empire Strikes Back on. And I really enjoyed it. I know that there's a lot made out of, big TV, big screen, but man, when you put those films are so meant to be seen on the biggest canvas you can possibly afford. And I just have a little entry-level projector with a screen that pulls down from the ceiling out of my porch. It's not the most, it's not audio file or video file proof, but man, it really does allow you to see things and details that you haven't seen. So I highly recommend it if you can. But the Android question popped up when I saw Lobot. Is Lobot an android? We said that there were no androids. There were no synthetics in Star Wars. And I saw Lobot and I go, could he qualify?
Well, he's a cyborg. I think that's been established.
He's a cyborg. What?
Yes. And we saw the Empire using that headband technology to enhance.
It was in Rebels. There was
in Rebels.
There was a Rhodian friend of Ezra's parents or something. That had that. But okay, so that's an Empire thing to sort of create maybe mind control. But why would it be I'm just curious. I'm thinking like why Lando's manservant would have a device like that unless he was maybe saved from being a slave.
Right. I think that's the story.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. They bring him up in the new comic books too. It's
Lobot. He doesn't get a lot of love. Lobot.
Yeah. Lando, as I said before, the current line of comic books is based between Empire and Jedi. And so Lobot goes back to liberate. Lando goes back to liberate Lobot from Cloud City.
Yeah.
Exciting.
And so much has been written and said about Empire Strikes Back and all. There's nothing that I can really add to it other than as I watched the movie, and sometimes I was actually talking to Cleveland Chris too over the weekend. We were talking about how you can recite the lyric, not the lyrics, excuse me, that you can recite the lines as you're watching these movies because you've seen them so many times. And sometimes it annoys me. It frustrates me. Like I want to see it like again for instead of the 500th time, I want to see it for like the 8th time, the 10th time. So taking yourself out of the same context, maybe that you're always watching the films in, that can sometimes help. But there was a lot in watching this out on the porch and on the big screen projected that allowed me to kind of see some things with fresh eyes. And it's just damn near a perfect movie. I mean, forget about it being the best Star Wars movie. It's arguably it's a masterpiece. I really think The Empire Strikes Back is a masterpiece, and I do prefer it to A New Hope. I have to say I do prefer it to A New Hope. But I was sitting there giddy and just gushing over this movie the other night.
Well, everything that we know about Empire does tend to lead us to believe it's perfect. I don't think a perfect movie can have an open ending like Empire does. I think a perfect movie stands on its own. And
that's fair.
I think Empire is a perfect Star Wars movie, right? But as far as being a perfect movie, because of the fact that it requires, it's the middle part of a story. So it's part of a perfect trilogy. if you want to look at it that way.
All right, let's say it's a perfect middle chapter, but it is a masterpiece. The whole original trilogy.
Middle chapters are the most difficult, for a lot of different reasons, and on a storytelling level, and for Empire to have been able to really just be a great sequel. That was something that was really unheard of in 1980. A great sequel. It'd been done once in the history of films prior to Empire Strikes Back. And that's Godfather 2.
Right.
There have been no other, the Bond films, that was a franchise.
I don't really consider them sequels.
They all stand alone. I don't consider
them sequels. Yeah, absolutely.
They all stand alone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the only film that can be kind of considered a sequel is From Russia with Love, because there are elements at the beginning of it that sort of give a nod to Dr. No, where they were just looking at it as a sequel. But with all those books that Fleming did, they knew they were going to keep mining those. So the great thing, I think the greatness about the Bond franchise is that they are created to be standalone films. And that way, that's how the franchise has been able to endure for over 50 years so successfully, is because of the fact that it doesn't get weighed down by its past. It doesn't get weighed down by its own history, because it doesn't rely on continuing a story from film to film. It's the guy.
Yes.
And you could put other actors in there playing the guy, but it's the guy that carries the franchise, not the story.
And if you want to hear more of us talking James Bond, you can check out Bondcast, the podcast. You can find all those episodes at rebelforceradio.com and just click on the podcast tab. Okay, I will rephrase, because I think you're right, and I may have overstated. What I'm going to say
No, not at all. I'm happy that you say that it's a perfect film, because I really can't debate you on it, but it's a perfect Star Wars.
Let me say that it is a perfect execution of what it set out to do. What they set out to do with The Empire Strikes Back, they executed it perfectly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that seems like a pretty good place to end this week's show.
Mm-hmm. That is the spot.
Keep on trucking, baby. And may the force be with you always.
Perfect.
Oh, yes. That's going to wrap things up this week on Rebel Force Radio. So great to spend this time with you. Thanks for taking the time out to listen to this show. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. There's lots more, and all that can be found on Patreon. If you want more Rebel Force Radio in your life, there's no better place to get it than over at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio, or you can find it on our website. Go to rebelforceradio.com and click on the Patreon banner. There you can find a myriad of ways to sign up and get more Rebel Force Radio, including weekly full show video. That's right. The podcast you're listening to now, we're crazy enough to run cameras on it, and you can actually watch us talking about Star Wars. So that's if you're an all-access member, but we've got tiers and price points for all budgets. You can find exclusive podcasts. These are things that you don't get on the regular feed if you're a subscriber to Rebel Force Radio. You're not going to get RFR Comlink. You're not going to get the Q&A. You're not going to get the Babu Freaks or the remastered episodes of Clone Wars Declassified, where we review every single episode of the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. That's only going to be found if you are a Patreon supporter. And
Star Wars Oxygen.
Speaking of exclusive, it's the only place to get the acclaimed podcast series Star Wars Oxygen, the music of John Williams, where Jimmy Mack analyzes the soundtracks of the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, The Force Awakens, and Rogue One. Those are being re-released one by one over at Patreon.
And if you are an RFR All Access member who has access to our exclusive full show video, you are no doubt admiring Jason and I wearing similar salmon colored T-shirts. We look like a couple of cousins here.
We really do. This was not planned.
Jason brought up a time when we had to wear these fugly yellow T-shirts at Star Wars Celebration per our benefactor at the time. And yeah, we both have PTSD from having to wear those shirts. They were hideous. There's pictures of us like in national newsstand magazines wearing those shirts.
And if you when you say yellow, I mean, I'm talking about Crayola crayon yellow, not a shade of yellow.
No, it was like if such a color called puke yellow existed, that's what color these shirts were. And we had to wear them all day. We talked to Mark Hamill wearing the puke yellow colored T-shirts. So I prefer the salmon shirts, salmon T-shirts. Look at this. Like we almost look, if we look at the screen, we look like we're two-headed monsters.
Yeah, Siamese twins. All right. One other benefit of being a member of Patreon is you get to jump to the head of the queue when you call into the Rebel Force Radio live shows, like our Bad Batch after show. And, there's going to be a Book of Boba Fett after show. So they're going to keep coming. So you can get to the head of the line when you call in. All those details, like I said, patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. And don't forget about YouTube. Rebel Force Radio, the #1 Star Wars podcast, is also available on YouTube. The new full show audios, those are being released. And Jim, they're kind of a little mini event, so to speak, when you release those.
Yeah, we launch them as premieres, so everyone gets to listen to the fresh episode when it launches in real time, and people talk in the chat, and it's great. It's just another great way to enforce our Star Wars fan community, and we do that with little events like live premieres on or not live, but real-time premieres on YouTube, and our Patreon page, of course, is always rocking and rolling. And I see a lot of familiar faces from Patreon on YouTube as well, and on Facebook. It's just great. It's just great.
It really is. It really is awesome. I'm real proud of the audience that has found this show, and they become very special to us, like good friends, family in some cases. But Rebel Force Radio on YouTube, it really is a repository. It's a virtual archive of Rebel Force Radio content going back years and years and years. Jimmy is always putting new stuff out there, from classic interviews, parodies, and bits to the latest live stream after shows that can all be found. Please just remember to like and subscribe when you happen on those videos. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to talk to us in between shows, you can do so at show@rebelforceradio.com. That's the email address. Also, the voicemail line. We're open 24/7, 7 days a week. There, you can just ring us up, 708-320-1RFR. The Facebook page, the official Rebel Force Radio Facebook group, is a great place to also have more conversation around your favorite film franchise, Star Wars. And don't forget about Instagram, Twitter. We're on all the social media. We haven't done the TikTok yet. I think... I don't see us doing Star Wars TikToks. We can't even say our names in the amount of time that you get on a TikTok.
I've reached social media overload. I don't see any other platforms being added to Rebel Force Radio in the near future. No way.
But what really matters is that you keep listening, and we'd love to have you subscribe and review Rebel Force Radio on your podcatcher of choice. That's right. Subscribe and review. We read all the reviews. We actually get them emailed to us, those reviews. We have one very simple rule on those reviews.
Make them good.
And we are streaming 24/7 at Apple Podcasts, WGN+, Jedi News, iHeart, TuneIn, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play. Anywhere you can find podcasts, you're going to find us right here at Rebel Force Radio. That'll do it for us. We'll see you next time. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
the Force will be with you, always.
Rebel Force Radio.
Keep on trucking, Obi-Wan.